Welcome to the second day of the Matrix Conference 2024 here in Berlin. We are here in Lab 3 and there is someone coming up here. His name is Pavel Zoneff. Maybe you already know him or have heard of him. He's the spokesperson and the Mädchen für alles in a way of the Tor project. And he will talk here and tell you actually what is going on with the Tor project at the moment and how it is advancing the possibility to make actually human rights possible, or make it possible to give people human rights in the internet. And also, if you listen carefully, you maybe get an idea how you can act by yourself and be a part of that. So please give a warm welcome to Pavel Zoneff. The stage is yours.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me and for joining me on a Saturday morning. We usually start our call or our talks with the question of who has heard of Tor, maybe by show of hands. Okay. Who has heard of Tor just this week, or maybe especially this week? Is there anybody who's running a relay or some type of other proxy for Tor in the audience? Okay. Oh, great. Okay, one person. Well, maybe after the talk, this will change. I have planned to leave some time for a Q&A at the end so we can also address some of the questions that came out of the recent reporting around Tor this week. But some of the common themes that I generally see when talking about Tor, especially in the last couple of years, is somehow the continued criticism that Tor isn't able to grow fast enough, or that it is not able to build better protections for onion services. And so for today's talk, I have chosen two recent events from our organization and that we've been a part of that kind of illustrate how this is in fact not true, and that actually provide a model for collective effort. One is a social movement that has led to the rapid deployment of 130 proxies in the Tor network in just a matter of days. And another one is a reflection on a serious attack that was facing the network and that led to the deployment of a new cryptographic mechanism to thwart them. But to get started, I'd like for everybody to meet Ren. Ren is one of our users, and we've recently conducted a large-scale survey to just understand what is the reason why people join Tor. And Ren wrote to us and said that to basically complain about the current model of the internet. So companies don't hesitate to share information for profit. Our data is shared without our permission from sources like our healthcare provider and employers. Even basic entertainment apps collect everything they can from the devices and sell that to others. And I imagine Ren's experience is probably something that resonates with a lot of other folks in here. I know that I often feel that I don't really know how my data is being siphoned up, and it's not clear who really or what is watching and cataloging or selling that internet activity. And so many people in this position would traditionally select a VPN, and those are great and popular tools. But we're also seeing more and more governments pressuring centralized VPN companies to provide backdoors so that they can see what the users are doing. We're also seeing VPN companies who are selling the data. We're seeing governments set up to own their own VPNs and sell those tools back to their citizens. And so this is really at the heart of what I'm here to talk about and how it affects our human rights on the internet. Some of the negative impacts of the centralization of internet services that gives way to a business model of mass surveillance and opens us up with a huge surface attack on, opens up a huge surface attack on encrypted services. And Tor provides a vision and an actionable model for a more open and equitable web. So if we're thinking about the popular internet, we have access to free products, free as in €0 to use, but only offered by companies that make money without charging for their services, by collecting data about you and monetizing that instead. And this data is sometimes inconspicuously just used to sell you stuff on Instagram, which is benign. But the benign turns into something much more severe when it is also used to test polarizing messaging, target those to micro communities, and influence the outcome of elections. So because of the value that this data produces, surveillance has become backed into the way we have built the internet. And it has been consolidated into the hands of only a few. So this model is also informing how governments conduct surveillance. And really, to be more precise, governments are able to outsource their surveillance because companies that are large enough to collect massive amounts of data are making it so easy for them. And most internet users are unwitting participants. In the US, for instance, where I reside, we know that through public documents that the NSA and FBI routinely buy internet records, including location data, search history, and app usage history without warrants. And they make these purchases from unregulated data broker companies. But even in the case that I'm hoping is going to come up in a second, even in the case of, for instance, legal access to, sorry, just give me a second to see. Oh, is this a network issue? Got it. Okay. Well, so basically what I wanted to show are two cases in which Proton email was actually subpoenaed by the French government to collect IP addresses and has therefore de-anonymized climate activists. And another case also rooted in the US is one example in which seemingly a mother and a daughter who were talking on Facebook about accessing reproductive health care where the authorities in Nebraska were essentially able to subpoena Facebook to get access to this communication that then was used to charge the mother and her daughter for trying to get reproductive health care access in a state where it's, currently outlawed. And so all of this is happening in ways that are completely opaque to a person who just thinks that they're just communicating with somebody online, that they're just using a service, that they're just looking up healthcare information in their neighborhood. And this is where Tor is different. Just a quick question. Any chance of getting the slides back up, or should I just try to? Okay. Maybe somebody can help me with the password for mitosis 3 again.
Let me see. Yes, password.
Oh, great. Sorry, Sean. Oh, floor. Got it. Okay, let's see. Just 1 second. Here we go again. Right. So yeah, this is the case in which the French activist was de-anonymized and ultimately arrested because of data that Proton was legally compelled to hand over, and this is the case of the abortion clinic. But essentially, yeah, all of this happens in an opaque way, and this is where Tor is different. So Tor is a decentralized, volunteer-run privacy and anonymity network that uses so-called onion routing technology to bounce a user's traffic across 3 different servers that we call relays before sending it to its destination. This allows users to protect their privacy and anonymity online. And millions of users are using Tor at any given moment, and these people are from all parts of the world. Right now, some of our biggest user groups are in the US and in Germany. And we also see hundreds of thousands of users from Ukraine, Russia, Iran, and other countries with oppressive regimes or that have started to crack down on encrypted services. In those instances, it is mostly used to bypass internet censorship and access the open web. So an average of 80,000 people download Tor browser for desktop daily, and more than 10 million mobile devices have installed Tor browser for Android since its release in 2019. Beyond individuals who use Tor, just for their own privacy or protection, other services and products have also started adopting Tor technology to offer privacy to their users. That technology is called Onion Services, and you can see some of our ecosystem partners here. But also news outlets like the New York Times, BBC, Deutsche Welle, and social media platforms have adopted Tor to offer privacy and circumvention features so that people can still access the information that they need and exercise their right to freedom of information. And so when you connect to the internet through the Tor network, you neutralize many of the onlookers that we frequently find in traditional internet settings. So using Tor browser goes even further by protecting you from fingerprinting techniques, cookies, and cross-site tracking. And when using Tor, you become much less visible to these onlookers, and your data becomes much less valuable. And it has the benefits of connecting millions of people safely with the news or messaging services that they would otherwise not have access to. But that sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually exist in a context of an internet economy that is built around monetizing data and offer a widespread tool without partaking in this business model? And the answer for us is, and it's been shown time and time again, it is through collective action and the contributions of a resilient, engaged community. So the two critical moments in Tor's recent past that I want to talk about today have demonstrated really how this global community came together to support the most vulnerable internet users and invest in this critical infrastructure. So for this, it is time to meet another user. She doesn't just want a more private internet, she just wants internet at all. She lives in a country where the government makes a lot of decisions about what information is accessible to its citizens, what they're allowed to read, watch, and learn on the internet. And VPNs are not an option to her, and traditional for-profit providers are rarely taking on the challenge of providing solutions for users who are facing her particular challenges, maybe because it doesn't fit the bottom line. And it is important to call this out, because when internet access is restricted, people are denied the ability to exercise their human rights, their rights to freedom of expression and access to information. And in these heavily censored contexts and surveilled environments, Tor apps like Orbod or Onion browser for iOS really are the only circumvention tool that works for most people reliably. And this has become a trend. Every time there is a moment of social instability, be it because of an uprising or local elections, wars, Tor has become a critical lifeline to connect with the rest of the world. And because of our status as a critical infrastructure provider for people in Iran, the Iranian government has actually started or tried to block Tor. And Tor can be censored, and mostly in two traditional ways, either by blocking the IP addresses that are publicly available or public relays, or by blocking Tor traffic. Now, if it comes to blocking the IP addresses, we have a very basic standard practice of providing people with bridges, Tor bridges, that are just IP addresses that are not actually publicly disclosed. But when it comes to blocking the Tor traffic, we knew that we needed something different to create a tool that not only has a non-public IP, but also hides the traffic by pretending that it is something else. And as you can imagine, these kind of traffic spoofing technologies leave us usually picking up the bandwidth bill. And so as a nonprofit, we don't always have a lot of funds to cover this kind of cost. And this is why in 2021, we launched a circumvention tool called Snowflake, and this really fits the bill for these two scenarios. It actually became a major leap forward in our fight to combat censorship on not just on the open web, but also against Tor. What makes Snowflake special is that its design allows any internet user to donate bandwidth to this tool. All that people need to do is install a Snowflake web extension in their browser, keep the tab open, and run it in the background. And this helps offset the cost of the bandwidth associated for this method of circumvention, because it basically donates a part of your bandwidth to people who need it. And so upon launch, Snowflake was quickly showing signs that it was going to be a great solution for this problem, and including for users like Nadia, who in Iran at the end of 2022, when the Masa Amini protests started, were able to use Snowflake to basically connect to the internet and kind of report on what was going on in the world. So we saw the increased usage of Snowflake by the people in Iran, and our community team began to organize an awareness campaign around this to teach more people about how it works. And a little bit of the success you can see here. This has not only increased the adoption of Tor and Snowflake, but now we saw a spike with 110,000 users connecting daily to Tor out of Iran. And this number is still relatively consistent today. Of these 110,000 people connecting from Iran, almost half need to use a circumvention tool that connects to Tor. And 39% out of all these users that use a circumvention tool come from Iran. And within Iran, 90% use Snowflake. So basically, almost all people connecting from Iran to Tor use Snowflake. So we also saw at the same time the number of volunteers that were running the Snowflake web extension skyrocket. And the information about Tor and Snowflake started to spread in the news. You can see some ZDF reporting here. And also on social media, some influencers really helping to amplify our campaign material. And there were people in Iran tweeting just about the fact that they could tweet again because of Snowflake. So, I specifically chose this photo. So this is in front of the Brandenburg Gate, actually. So we even saw people who were protesting in solidarity, even here in Germany, to call on people to install Snowflake. And so what was the result? Up until before the protests, we had like roughly 20,000 volunteers donating bandwidth, so 20,000 proxies. And after the protest, it spiked to almost 130,000 volunteers. And this number has been relatively steady, as you can see. And this is because there was a need and the collective effort of hundreds of thousands of volunteers and activists to support vulnerable internet users. And they were able to do this with Tor because we had an easy-to-use, easily deployable solution that comes pre-equipped on Tor browser or the browsers for Android and iOS. But unfortunately, with every viral success story, or for every viral success story, there's also a persistent attack on the Tor network and some unfortunate news. And that is also a challenge when you have to address them in a nonprofit structure. So while we have a strong community of champions that make our work possible, we also still rely on donations and other forms of public or private funding. So not just the bandwidth donation that is becoming increasingly easier for people to do, but actual money. And so making the case for donors, and especially traditional donors, when you're basically trying to disrupt the most prominent internet model is not always an easy case to make. Onion services have been some of the hardest innovations to fund with traditional sources, because apart from a fundamental misunderstanding of that technology, we've also had some funders tell us that they love everything about Tor and the privacy protections it offers, but Onion services just go a little step too far. It is too opaque, and they cannot buy into it. And for a time, Onion services were the casualty of this attitude, and the Tor project had a technology we believed in, and that at the core, our community valued, but it was kind of hitting a point where it stopped growing and was upsetting the amount of people that also were relying on the continued existence of this technology. And without the significant support, we couldn't prioritize the Onion service development. And then it was fortunately, or unfortunately, in a moment of crisis, when the risk of losing this digital public infrastructure presented itself, that again, a collective of people and organizations and products that use Tor for their own services came together to form the Onion Source Resource Coalition, and basically helped us by providing the necessary funds that allowed us to bootstrap a rapid response to some prevalent attacks on the Tor network. And the result of these efforts was we were able to up staff internally and quickly deploy and hire people specifically dedicated to Onion service development. And we built and released a cryptographic mechanism that drastically reduces the negative impacts of a denial of service attack on Onion services. And the solution, in theory, had been available for a long time, but it wasn't until we were able to dedicate a team to it that we were able to implement it. And it is really this coming together of the apps and services that use Tor as the basis for their own products to connect and engage with their audiences, once again, that shows the importance of a coordinated collective effort in support of Tor to solve a problem for critical infrastructure that offers an alternative model to accessing the internet with more privacy and security, or anonymity, and in some cases, even access to the internet at all. And so, like Ren, who really wants to fight back against the massive collection of data and who uses Onion service to do so, or Nadia, who simply wants to get the word out about the conditions in her country. But there's also parents who want to research their child's health condition and don't want that information splattered out on the internet, or a teenager who has questions about their sexuality, or a worker who wants to organize in the workplace without their employer finding out. So if we're thinking about all the different use cases, it's especially important to remember that maintaining this public infrastructure is not just an incredibly difficult task, one that can only be accomplished together, but it also makes a real impact in people's life. And so the case of Snowflake has shown that people are willing to rally around really quickly to provide help for people who need more internet bandwidth in order to circumvent the blocking mechanisms of their country. But this doesn't obviously fix all the bandwidth and location diversity issues that we face at Tor. We continue to address them, and it is also only possible through continued support of our users and other supporters. And it really only works if people amplify it, because not just because we need the collective support, but also the more people use it, the better the anonymity protections and the privacy protections become. And so I hope that these two examples from Tor's recent past have helped to illustrate the ideas behind how we can all work together to make the Tor network even stronger, but also how Tor, in fact, is one of the few actionable models for a more open and secure and equitable internet. There's obviously more that we have done, and we can talk about some of these initiatives, but we really see this model that is very community focused, not for profit, to be the ideal one to achieve a true vision of a free internet. And so obviously, I wouldn't be here talking about collective effort if it wasn't for a call to action. And I think everybody in this room should at least download Snowflake and try it out. I like to call it the gateway drug to Tor, because once you see how encumbered you are with the use and how easy it is and how it does not really necessarily have any negative impacts on your performance. I use it every day, have it open with all of my millions of other tabs that I have open in my browser. I do my video calls, I watch my YouTube videos, and it still works. I have no lag time whatsoever. And as you're slowly becoming aware of how these things work and how these work specifically without any repercussions for your own internet activity, maybe we can go from just one person who runs a relay to more people of you who can run a relay. And so I really want to encourage you, go check us out and see how you can get involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pavel. Are there any questions in that room?
Okay.
So first, thank you for the talk. It's very interesting. One of the things I really like about the Tor project is so you have shown us personal. I like the fact that there is user research and the fact that it's not just a technology problem that you are solving, but a real social problem. The question I do have is, are there things Tor can't help with, and are you partnering up with other projects? One project I have in mind, I know that uses Tor is Tails, for people who need more offline things, but are there other projects you are partnering with?
Right. So definitely Tails is a good example because of the of some of the threat models that the internet browser and also the internet infrastructure doesn't address. Right now, we don't have any projects in the pipeline that that address a different kind of scenario. So I know of Hushline that recently launched, which is a tip line for journalists and potentially also for other use cases that uses Tor. And the way that this works is really that because it is public infrastructure, we hope for people to see the value in it and really leave people free rein to develop it. So our intervention at this point is the awareness raising, and B, making sure that we partner in such a way that the people keep their software updated and that we can provide a source of support. One tool I think that has made this very easy is Onion Spray, and I can add the link to the presentation. I know you're sharing this. Onion Spray is basically a self-service toolkit for internet service providers that already have an existing infrastructure and that just want to make it available on the Tor network. And so this is probably the best and easiest to use application to also just, if you're the owner of a website and you just want to get it mirrored on the Tor network with some of the anti-censorship protections that it offers, that's a great way to do it. But we are fairly hands-off. Yeah.
Thank you.
There was another question over there.
Yeah.
So we do microphone routing in the audience.
I love it. Yes.
It's completely transparent. We can exactly see
Yes.
who is speaking. So
Exactly.
your question, please.
Yes, thank you so much. I have a question regarding the censorship, because as governments try to block more and more IPs, is there any limit to what Snowflakes and Tor can
Yeah.
is there going to be any point, let's say, because for instance, example, as government, North Korea has an internet, but only a few nodes, let's say, connect to the outside world, and they're completely controlled by the government. So is there any limit to which Snowflakes can operate?
Yeah, I think the fundamental understanding is that, yeah, Snowflake has certain traffic spoofing qualities, and they might not work in extremely restrictive governments, right? So if we're trying to spoof the traffic to make it look like something, ideally that looks like a voice call or a video call, or even that's something that runs on Azure or AWS, that is generally a safe bet, because most governments couldn't block these services without incurring collateral damage. But we do have instances and incidents in the world, and Turkmenistan is a great example, where the government just doesn't care, and even at their own expense just shuts down these major cloud service providers. And so those are some natural limitations. But I definitely encourage people to check out WebTunnel, which is our latest pluggable transport. And that tries to solve that by taking advantage of vast unused amounts of the IP addresses that are available. And so it doesn't necessarily make it look like you're watching something that's content heavy, but just like you're accessing a website. But I can already hear the criticism. If you live in a country where the internet is just generally shut down, that also provides some natural limitations. But yeah, we're basically always looking at what is the next frontier of censorship, and how can we execute this? And again, what I will say is the research is out there. A lot of it is theoretical on papers, and it is being brought to us. And then we try to build a process around that and try to find a funder for it. That's, I think, really where the strength of us as an organization lies, that we turn the research into practical, tangible applications.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And there was another question in the very back.
And we have a third hob with the microphone, yes. Yeah, you just did. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Just on the censorship as well, do you have any estimate of the sort of overheads that these attempts at censorship give you? And are you successful in getting any funding to support with that and with that admin side of it and trying to address these?
I mean, I have to say that I think we're managing it well, and my team is probably already rolling their eyes because everybody's overworked. So I guess the question is, do we have enough overhead for this? No, probably not. Because at the end of the day, let's look at the scale. We're a team organizationally of just a couple dozen folks, and we're dealing with major governments with almost unlimited funds, right? I mean, when you're taking on Russia, Iran, China. So if the issue is funding, it really comes down to whenever we're talking about the impact of censorship and avoiding censorship, people buy into it. But they also don't understand that the underlying infrastructure is at times opaque. And this is a little bit the push and pull that we have. To also make them understand that because censorship is so dynamic, as we've just heard, right, like with the examples before, when you have a grant for a year or 2 or 3, we might propose a solution in the beginning that is no longer viable 2 years later. And so now we have these grant milestones, and now we have to justify how we ended up building a different tool than we proposed. So I think this is more of a challenge than the overhead. And so, but we're working with funders to make them understand that because this landscape is not just getting so vast and so powerful, but is also so iterative, that we need to have more iterative funding. And we're looking at alternative funding models like more collective and community-based funding, public goods funding, Gitcoin grants, to tackle that.
And the last question from the audience is over there. Can we have a routing situation again? Oh, the relay is working well.
I think we're bridging. Yeah.
Pavel, hello. Pavel, thank you very much for that. I just wonder if you could say something about how Tor is enabling, I'm a journalist, journalists to communicate more safely with whistleblowers and sources, you know, particularly in repressive regimes, but also just more generally.
Yeah, sure. I think some of the tools that have proven really beneficial are Onion Share. Let me just go back to that slide, which is basically a secure file drop that helps, and then also Ricochet Refresh. And I have failed to put the Hushline tip app, but there are now apps and services that are popping up for specific use cases. Those are really prominent with reporters. But what I think the bigger challenge is that there is no 100% bulletproof tech solution, and it's not even Tor. So even when you're using, let's say, an Onion Share service, and let's say you share the Onion side with the source, and the way to access it, or the source shares the Onion side where they've uploaded a file, and the access code to do this in the same communications channel, and that communications channel is compromised, then you're also decreasing your effectiveness at staying anonymous with your source and protecting that source. So I think the basic hygiene of spreading your information out as much as possible, maintaining a decentralized approach, even with the different tools, your browsers that you use, those still are probably, in addition to the technological solutions, the things that keep you most effective. So it's also behavioral.
Okay, so the last question is coming from myself. As I was a part of the content selecting team for that conference, we had big discussions about who to invite and what messages we would like to spread. And we thought of, hey, this is a good opportunity to ask actually another interesting community, what do you think about our ecosystem, our approaches, and also the values or directions the Matrix technology ecosystem is going to. So can you please give us a bit an idea what the Tor project is thinking about the matrix.
100%. And I can tell you, we love you guys because internally, it is one of the ways that keep our teams connected. Like the overhead question came up. Our fundraising team, and also including myself, might not be the best people to, just access all the information on IRC. So having a bridge to our developers and everybody else, so at a very fundamental level, even allows us to have cross-org communication. Also, we're 100% decentralized as a team. We don't have any offices. We all work remote and fully distributed. And so that essence of communication, that is all centered around Matrix. So that first. And the other part, obviously, like the same interoperability and connectivity aspect, I think, combines us, in which people use your technology to offer their services or to connect with their audiences. We heard about healthcare providers and emergency services providers yesterday that basically are all underpinned by Matrix. And this is kind of the model that we're, I think, emulating in many ways, as we can see exactly here, that Tor wants to be that solution that underpins much more services, many more services on the internet. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Pavel, and get a big round of applause for him. And thank you.
Thanks.